Hi there, Reimu. What you got there? Your long gohei? Reimu, I should have known. You wear red and white all the time. The joke is that the 17th of August isn't just the anniversary of 2020, but also the Independence Day of Indonesia. And the flag of Indonesia is red and white. Did you know I'm Indonesian? Now you know. Hello again and welcome to what's possibly the last entry in the Toho ship ranking videos. Yeah, I decided early on that if this series wasn't as successful as I'd hoped for it to be, I'd just cut it short and move on to other things. After all, it wouldn't really be worth it to keep this going when taking into consideration the amount of time I put into each of these videos. But if this does end up doing well, then who knows, there might be a future entry after all. Anyway, I don't wanna make the intro too long this time, so let me explain a few things on how this video will work before we review the rules and such. Since Toho 20 only came out last year, there's not a lot of ships to cover. Even if I'm covering all of the characters, it's also because of this lower number that I'm gonna try my best to give a good explanation on why each ship exists instead of brushing them off and moving on, since that's a lot more feasible compared to the first two entries. I'm gonna go in the order of the stages, so I'll be going through the stage 1 through 6 bosses chronologically and then the extra stage boss afterwards. Before we move on, here's a summary of Flandre's episode. Alright, without further ado, here are the rules. As usual, a more in-depth coverage will be in the upper right hand corner. That being said, my data only comes from Pixef, no other websites. R18 works uncounted, men aren't counted due to lacking a tag equivalent to Yuri or Yaoi. Characters from media outside of Toho are also not counted. Both characters have to be present in the drawing. AI-generated artworks aren't counted. My own works also don't count, since I can theoretically keep drawing my favorite ships and increase the numbers. The first time I gathered my numbers was on the 15th of July, which was then revised on the 4th of August. Because there wasn't a long gap between these videos, unlike between Reimu and Flandre, I have a sneaking suspicion that either Love Train or Pixef's Toho Ships database, or both, are regularly updated every month. Some numbers in Love Train were increased, and when I checked on Pixef, the ship that changed numbers had a work posted close to when I was revising the data. So that's why I assumed the numbers got updated by the time I did that. Oh, and side note, I doubt any of you remember this, but I made a video covering the Toho 20 demo at the time of its release, and when the full version was released, I was interested in doing that too. But now, since it's literally been a year since the game came out, I'll just rip the band-aid off and say, yeah, that video's not happening. You can take this video as compensation for that instead. Now then, let's begin the rankings, and our first subject is the stage 1 boss, Ubame Chirizuka. At third place, yes, she only has 3 ships right now. With one single artwork, we have Son Bitan. Bitan, along with another character you'll see in a bit, lives in the Forest of Sanctuaries, part of Yokai Mountain. That area is also known as Yamanba's Sanctuary Land. And you know who's a Yamanba? That's right, it's our girl Ubame right here. Besides living in the same area of residence, Bitan also dresses very similarly to Ubame. And if you know anything about Toho ships, the power of similarities is one of the strongest tools a ship can have to have lots of numbers. Though I guess Bitan is an exception in this case. Anyway, here's the drawing of this ship. I'm also putting the name of the artist separate from the image, not only so I can make the image bigger since I'm not restricted to having to show the website's UI, but to also make the artist's name actually readable so that you can find them easier, assuming you have a Japanese keyboard for most of these. Alright, onto the penultimate character? That doesn't sound very powerful in this scenario, does it? At second place with 3 works, we have Chimi Hoju. So, Chimi is the stage 2 boss of Toho 20, and a common thing you'll see in a lot of ships is that some characters are shipped solely because their stages are right next to each other. That's how you get your Hina and Nitori, Parsi and Yugi, or Doremi and Sagume. But somehow this logic doesn't apply to Patchouli and Sakuya? Strange. Chimi has also stated in her in-game dialogue that she's at least acquainted with Ubame, and for me personally, that's the bare minimum requirement for shipping. I can understand why people make ships for characters that have never seen each other, but I like to enjoy the few crumbs that I can use, because a few crumbs are all you need. For example, my favorite ship is Raisin and Moko, and that happened because of this one paragraph in the wiki. which is now deleted because of updated guidelines, which is kind of yes, if you ask me. Like the gods, I can view the page history. To summarize, Ubame and Chimi know each other and their stages are right next to each other. One more thing I can say about these two is that there's a post that's a compilation of drawings that include this ship. And in this compilation, there are a couple of crack ships that you'll see later in the video. Here's a different drawing though. To the winner we go. At first place with 10 works, we have Nemuno Sakata. This is the other character that I mentioned in Bitan section earlier. Nemuno is the first Yamanba to appear in Touhou, and just like with Ubame and Bitan, she lives in the sanctuary part of Yokai Mountain and dresses similarly. One point that Nemuno has over Bitan, besides being the same species as Ubame, is the abilities that she and Ubame respectively have. Nemuno's ability is to create sanctuaries, whereas Ubame's is to destroy them. Quite literally opposing forces, which in the shipping world means that they are meant for each other. It's like if you have both of Canis forms, but they were separated. And then they kissed. So there aren't any self-sized ships this time around, but if this ends up being the last entry in the series, I had to put that somewhere. Here's a drawing of Ubame and Nemuno. Now, let's move on to the next character, the Stage 2 boss, which, as I've previously mentioned, is Chimi Hoju. At third place, again, with 3 works, we have Ubame Chirizuka. Right, I forgot to mention, but there is gonna be a lot of overlaps in this video. I'll try to give a different comment when I'm covering a different character, but for others like this one, there's just too little info for me to go off of, so I'm afraid I have nothing else to say. Here's a different drawing from last time, and counting the compilation earlier, I have just shown you every single drawing of this ship. Moving on. At second place with 15 works, we have Nariko Michigami. She's the stage 3 boss of Touhou 20, so you'd naturally assume this is another stage is right next to each other's situation, right? Well, yes, but there's a bit more to it. Because in one of the endings for Marisa's route, it's revealed that Chimi was the one who placed Nariko at the entrance of the stage 3 pyramid to guard it and prevent anything from getting out of the pyramid. Chimi asks Marisa to visit Nariko from time to time so that Nariko doesn't get lonely. Because of how Chimi essentially created Nariko and her worrying about Nariko's living conditions, Chimi can be seen as a motherly or guardian figure to Nariko, akin to that of Kanako and Sanae, Kasen and Reimu, or Erin and Raisin. I listed those other pairings as examples because while a good chunk of people generally agree that these pairings have more of a familial bond, other people still decide to make it more of a romantic thing. I'm not saying you should go one way or the other, let alone think negatively on the people that don't view it the same way as you. But you should note that everyone sees these pairings differently. I have no idea why I got into preach mode there, but I will note that there wasn't any drawing of this ship with these tags until after the release of the full version of Touhou 20, meaning these drawings only existed after people saw the ending that revealed the connection between Chimi and Nariko, unlike with Ubame and Chimi, as they had one drawing that was made after only the demo was released. So, make of that what you will. Here's a drawing. Let's see who has the gold this time. Well, I guess Nariko has some gold on her as well, but you get what I mean. At first place with 19 works, we have Nue Hoju. The reason why I didn't just skip past this like I did with Remilia's section in the Flandre video is because, well, we don't know what kind of relationship Chimi and Nue have outside of having the same last name. And anytime Zun is asked about it in his drunk streams, he just takes a sip of beer and ignores the question. Dueki does clarify that despite having the same last name, their respective species are different, which means that they're most likely not related at all. There's actually already precedent for this in Touhou with Yukari and Ran, as they share the same last name Yakumo, but they aren't related by blood. Rather, Ran gained the Yakumo name after becoming Yukari's Shikigami. That's about it. I suppose the only reason this is Chimi's most popular ship is because of how quote-unquote obvious it is, since her only other 2 ships are other characters from the same game as her, so people probably didn't even consider them as potential ship candidates for a while, which was actually true for Nariko. Here's a drawing. And hey, speaking of Nariko, now it's her turn. At 5th place, thank god we don't only have 3 characters anymore, and that actually applies to the rest of the characters going forward. Anyway, with only one single artwork, we have Yuiman Asama. Yuiman is the stage 4 boss, so you would assume this is yet another one of those, right? And to that, I say, maybe? I don't know. The artist that posted the ship said in the caption that they weren't into one of Yuiman's other ships, which is probably the main motivation for the ship existing. And you know what? big ups to you. Sometimes you need to be disinterested in one thing to further boost your interest in another. That's why I love Raisin and Moko. Because I hate Raisin and Junko. Anyway, here's that drawing. Next one. At 4th place with 2 works we have Cherno. From what I can gather, this pairing exists because Nariko likes to give out riddles, and Cherno is too stupid to answer the riddles. I think that's about it. Again, there's hardly any info. Here's a drawing. On to the top 3. Hey, I can actually say that now. At 3rd place with 6 works we have Nina Watari. This one seems to have picked up steam, albeit not by a lot, only recently. From what I can tell, this one stems from their mutual limited knowledge of the world. Nina accepts every information she takes in, causing her to become a conspiracy theorist, whereas Nariko, as I mentioned earlier when talking about her and Shimi, only ever guards the entrance of the pyramid, meaning that she most likely doesn't have much life experience outside of that. So I suppose this ship exists with the idea that these two get to discover the world together. Here's a drawing. Moving on. At 2nd place with 10 works we have Marisa Kirisame. If there's a bingo board of Touhou ships, Marisa is the free space. Ignore the fact that this is her only appearance in this video. Anyway, as much as I don't want to repeat myself, I mentioned before that in one of her endings, Shimi asked Marisa to spend more time with Nariko so that Nariko doesn't get lonely. This seems to be a popular ship for Nariko at the time of the Touhou 20 demo's release, as there's only 2 other drawings that was made after the full version's release. Hell, there's even a Compact Yomu video on this. That's the 2nd time I've mentioned this channel in this series, so I would like to clarify that I don't intend to be mean-spirited to any other creators that I mentioned, Compact Yomu included. At the end of the day, I still want my channel to succeed, and trying to act like I'm better than the channels that already have success is not the right way to go. What do I look like, the creator of Chimtopia? Well, anyway, here's a drawing for Nariko and Marisa. On to the winners. That's right, with an S, because for the first time in Touhou ship ranking history, the first place is occupied by more than one character. Now then, shall we see who they are? At 1st place with 15 works, we have Narumi Yatadera and Shimi Hoju. Well, fortunately for me, despite there being 2 characters, I only need to talk about one, as I have no new information to relay in relation to Shimi. As for Narumi, I think during the time of the Touhou 20 demo's release, there was speculation of Nariko being a former Jizou statue. I even said so in the thumbnail for my video about the demo. I'm not entirely sure where this came from, or rather where I got the information from, but I'm sure this was the reason for the ship existing at the time. As just like with Marisa, the majority of the drawings for the ship was made at the time of the demo's release, with only 4 drawings being made after the full version. With the info I can gather now, I suppose the reasoning is that they serve similar roles. Nariko guards the pyramid entrance, whereas Narumi guards the stone towers in the Sanzu River to make sure they don't fall over. Here's a different drawing for Shimi, and now here's a drawing for Narumi. Now it's time for the stage 4 boss, which is Ueman Asama, my personal favorite of the Touhou 20 characters just by design alone. But before we proceed, since we've reached the halfway point, this would be the time for me to ask you to like and subscribe, especially if you're hoping to see more entries to this series. Even if that's not the case, I still have other plans for this channel, so be sure to stick around. Alright, let's go. At 6th place with only 1 work, we have Nariko Michigami. Yeah, let's just get this over with. I've said everything I can say about this in Nariko section. Here's the drawing that you already saw earlier. Let's move on. At 5th place with 4 works, we have Yashie Kicho. Ueman is someone who enjoys hunting deer. Some of her spell cards are in reference to that, and she mentions that in her defeat dialogue, inviting either Reimu or Marisa to come hunt deer with her sometime. Yashie is apparently someone who also loves deer. I can't find the source for this in the Touhou wiki. The only reference I could find was Ron's winning dialogue against her in the versus mode of Touhou 19, where she questions Yashie's appearance and mentioned a deer, probably because of Yashie's horns, which look like antlers. But yes, the common thread between these 2 characters are deer. They must have a lot of fun during Christmas. Here's a drawing. Let's move on. At 4th place with 9 works, we have Nina Watari. Nina is the extra stage boss of Touhou 20, and Ueman serves as the mid-boss of said extra stage. And that seems to be the only link that these 2 have. I suppose they have some similarities in relation to their stories and abilities. Yuiman has the ability to essentially purify information by feeding them to the snake around her, whereas Nina, as I mentioned before, accepts all information as truth, no matter how conspiratory it is. So these two have a mutually beneficial relationship, with Nina going, Google's AI overviews this, and then Yuiman cuts her off and tells her to just scroll down a bit. There is a different dynamic for this ship, but since Nina will appear later in the video, I'll save it for her section instead. Here's a drawing. Onto the top 3. Again, at 3rd place with 14 works, we have Watatsuki no Toyohime. Toyohime is the stage 5 boss of TOO 20, so yet again their stages are right next to each other. Of course, if you actually know the story of TOO 20, you'd know that this relationship is a bit screwed up. As you know, Toyohime is a Lunarian, and Lunarians are the ones that brainwash Yuiman and forces her to work for them. So if these two do end up in a romantic relationship, there's a clear power imbalance at play here, especially if you assume that Yuiman is still in her brainwashed state. In fact, every drawing of the ship that isn't part of a compilation shows that exact scenario. Here's one right now. Let's move on. At 2nd place with 16 works, we have Kanako Yasaka. In Reimu's ending, when you have the Shintoism Wind Stone as your main stone, Kanako appears in that ending and talks about Yuiman, referring to her as an old friend from her hometown. And they both also have a snake motif. Not a lot of things going on, but for what we do have, they do make sense. I honestly kind of dig the ship. Kanako has always been perceived as the lesser goddess when compared to Suwako, so it's nice to see that she actually has something for herself that Suwako doesn't. Here's a drawing. And now for the rather predictable winner. At 1st place with a whopping 288 works, we have Arya Iwanaga. This right here is the big one. Zanmu and Hisami from TOO 19 was just a practice run for the real ship that was going to mop the floor. Within hours of the full release of TOO 20, the Japanese community, since they would be the first to understand the game story and characters, already made fanarts of these two. So where to even begin? Well, both of them live in the Asama Purifying Mountain, being worshipped as the gods there. When the Lunarians took over, they sealed Arya and brainwashed Yuiman. Arya's main motivation for having started the incident of putting Gensokyo into a standstill in TOO 20 was to save Yuiman from the Lunarians. That's pretty much the gist of it. It honestly felt like Zun intended for these two to be together when he wrote them. After all, it seems like he's a pretty big supporter of these two, as the ship constantly comes up in his drunk streams. As you may have noticed, I tend not to flock towards the more popular ships, and it's not because I try too hard to be different. It just so happens that most of the rarer ships have things that I like more compared to the popular ones, and their rarity only serves to make me like them more. This ship though, I quite like it. Even without knowing their story, both of Yuiman and Arya's designs look great individually, and it only becomes greater when they're together. Here's merely a single drawing out of many. Let's move on to the stage 5 boss, which is Watatsuki no Toyohime. At 8th place with 2 works, we have Reimu Hakure. Here's another case of a ship that already appeared in a previous entry, appearing again. But unlike Flandre's episode, there wasn't any change this time around. Reimu and Toyohime had 2 works in February, they have 2 works now. So I might as well remind you that the number of works in Love Train is actually more, at 6 works. The 4 missing works stems from novels that uses the Toyo Rei tag, but it's not at all about Touhou, let alone Reimu and Toyohime. I will note one thing though. Between the 2 drawings that this ship has, the most recent one was made after TOO 20 was released, whereas the first drawing was made a long time ago. I mentioned in the Reimu video that TOO 20 wasn't able to popularize the ship, but it seems I was technically wrong. That's about it. Here's a drawing, which actually never appeared in the Reimu video. Moving on. At 7th place with 4 works, we have Reisen Udongin Inaba. Before Reisen fled from the moon, Toyohime along with her sister Yorihime were Reisen's masters. The 2 of them were also presumably the ones that gave her the name of Reisen, and you'll see why in a bit. Unfortunately, I think that's all I have to say. Despite how long these characters have existed and the close connection that they have, this ship remains pretty unpopular. Kinda like Sakuya and shut up. Here's a drawing. On to the next one. At 6th place with 6 works, we have Sagume Kishin and Erin Yagokoro. Wow, a tie, and both characters are Lunarians. And that is also probably the only reason why Toyohime is paired with Sagume. None of the drawings I found of these two go into any detail beyond the fact that they're both Lunarians. It should be noted that since Sagume is a Lunarian goddess and Toyohime is a Lunarian
princess,
there's a possibility that Toyohime and by extension Yorihime answer to Sagume. Not sure how true this is though. The same logic applies to Erin, but she and Toyohime have an existing relationship in canon. Erin was a tutor to the Watatsuki sisters, and both of them hold her in high regard because of that. They are also distantly related to Erin due to, let me nab the words from the wiki here, one of the Watatsuki sisters was the wife of Erin's grandnephew, while the other one was married to their son. Still don't know how that works. To think there'd be a family tree more fucked than Zeus's. Occasionally, you'll also see Kaguya alongside Erin and the Watatsuki sisters, but that's about all I can say. Here's a drawing for Sagume, and here's a drawing for Erin. Next, at 5th place with 8 works we have Arya Iwanaga and Raisin from the manga. Alright, I'll address the rabbit in the room first. As I mentioned before, I speculated that the Watatsuki sisters were the ones to give Raisin her name, and the proof is the fact that the moment they get a new pet rabbit, they name it Raisin again. For being all-powerful, the Lunarians sure lack creativity. I should note that you might think Raisin deserves to have a higher number if you look for the drawings yourself, as there are some drawings that show Toyohime with a blue-haired moon rabbit, but the captions of these posts clarify that the moon rabbit shown here is not Raisin, which is further emphasized by how Raisin's tag is missing from these posts. I do have to wonder though, if you're gonna make a moon rabbit OC, why not give them a different colored hair than the ones that are actually canon? I'll never know. Oh yeah, Arya's here. So as I mentioned before in Ueman section, Arya was sealed inside the shrine of the Asama Purifying Mountain by the Lunarians. But it would seem Toyohime then unsealed her to use her powers? I'm probably just not literate enough, but that's the info I get from the wiki. Speaking of, the wiki also states that their canon relationship is unknown, since they most likely have never met or interacted. But they clearly know each other, as Arya mentions Toyohime during her pre-battle dialogue. Like with Ueman, this relationship most likely won't end very well, especially because Arya quite literally holds a grudge against the Lunarians. And I think that's about it. Here's a drawing for Raisin, and here's one for Arya. Next. At 4th place with 11 works, we have Yukari Yakumo. Yukari and Ran attempted to invade the moon, but they got apprehended, and Raisin seems to have a jolly good time doing that. The ship seems to stem from their interaction in Silent Sinner in Blue, but I haven't read that manga so I can't give you any detail as to how that goes, besides what I just said about Yukari's attempted invasion. This ship seems to be more popular on the Western community though, as I've seen fanarts of these two on Twitter from time to time. Here's a drawing. To the top 3 we go. At 3rd place with 14 works, we have Ueman Asama. I have nothing more to say about this beyond what I already said in Ueman section, so I'll bring this up instead. I have actually drawn these two before, in the form of disembodied heads because these were done as warm-ups for a different drawing. So why did I do that? Why did I pick these two? Well, if you look at the other drawings in these compilations, you'll notice that a lot of them consist of pretty rare pairings, and this is exactly that. It may be 3rd place for Toyohime's ships, but it's nowhere near as popular as Ueman and Arya, as you saw earlier. Speaking of this, since this is my own work, this doesn't count towards the ranking, but I'm still allowed to talk about it. Here's a rather tame drawing of these two compared to the one in Ueman section. Time for the penultimate character, and you probably won't expect this one. At 2nd place with 16 works, we have Tachi Hinanai. Toyohime loves peaches. Tachi has peaches on her hat. The moon is really high up. Heaven is also probably really high up. I mean, the moon was even chosen to be the first sphere of heaven in Dante's Paradiso. I think that's all the connection that these two have, so here's a drawing. Let's move on. Number 1 is Yorihime. Next up, it's time for the stage 6 boss, Arya Iwanaga. At 5th place with 2 works, we have Sakuya Izayoi, Fujiwara no Moko, and Shimada Thank You. Hey, look! Shimada's finally a part of these rankings. Did you notice that she was the only Windows era final boss to be absent up until now? So this might seem like random picks at first, but it's an amazing coincidence that these 3 occupy the same place, because their connection to Arya is pretty similar to one another. All of these pairings exist due to Arya being mostly based on the goddess Iwanagahime, hence her last name being Iwanaga. Iwanagahime has a younger sister, that being Konohana Sakuya Hime, their father being Oya Matsu. Before we go any further, let me remind you of Sakuya and Moko's connections to the moon. Moko is of course an immortal due to her drinking the Horai elixir, which originated from the moon. But in case you didn't know the full story, the Horai elixir was supposed to be destroyed in a volcano, only for a certain goddess to appear and stop that from happening. That goddess being Konohana Sakuya Hime. In fact, it was her that instructed the Horai elixir to be handed over to her sister Iwanaga Hime, so that's where Moko's connection to Arya comes from. Now, what about Sakuya? Well, Erin stated in Imperishable Night that she seems to have recognized Sakuya, but this fact was never explored ever again. It's a possibility that Sakuya has a deep connection to Konohana Sakuya Hime. After all, Sakuya is in her name. Because of that, she'd also be related to Iwanaga Hime, which in this case is Arya. So that's Sakuya and Moko. So what about Shimada? According to the wiki, Zun initially gave her the name Ichihime, which indicated that she may be based on Kamuo Ichihime, which is another daughter of Oya Matsumi, though the wiki doesn't state her being a sister to either Iwanaga Hime or Konohana Sakuya Hime, but the three of them all share a father. To summarize, Arya is based on Iwanaga Hime, the older sister of Konohana Sakuya Hime, who has a connection to Moko and is possibly deeply linked to Sakuya. The father of these two goddesses is Oya Matsumi, who also has another daughter named Kamuo Ichihime, which is possibly who Shimada is based on. So yeah, quite a lengthy explanation for the last place of Arya's ships. Although, can I even call these ships? These pairings exist because of the possibility that Arya may be related to some of them. The only one that's not possible is Moko, though they do have one thing in common, that being their hatred against the Lunarians. All of that being said, here's a drawing for Sakuya, Moko, and Shimada. Next. At 4th place with, oh wow, another one. 4 works, we have Reimu Hakurei. I assume this is just a classic case of the final boss being paired with the protagonist. Most of the drawings I came across seems to involve Reimu recognizing that Arya is supposed to be Iwanaga Hime. One info I omitted in the previous placement is that, in the legends, Konohana Sakuya Hime is supposed to be beautiful, whereas Iwanaga Hime is supposed to be ugly. And so, in most of these drawings, Reimu is seen to be rather flustered at the sight of Arya, as she is as far away as possible from what you'd call ugly. Most of these drawings also involve Arya's mid-battle dialogue about how the protagonist is running out of time, though I'm not entirely sure why it's only this line. Maybe it's something that got lost in translation. Anyway, here's a drawing, yet another one that was absent in the Reimu video. Onto the top 3. At 3rd place with 7 works, we have Nina Watari. Nina is the extra stage boss, so she comes after Arya, meaning this is sort of stages are next to each other situation. Other than that, I don't really see what else this ship has. They're both connected to the Asama Purifying Mountain, with Arya as its goddess and Nina being born here. It seems maybe their mutual relationship with Yuiman may also be a factor. I have more to say about that aspect, but I'll save it for Nina's section later. For now, here's a drawing. To the penultimate character, or should I say, to the moon. At 2nd place with 8 works, we have Watatsuki no Toyohime. Unfortunately, I've said all I could in Toyohime's section, so take this different drawing, and let's move on. At 1st place with 288 works, we have its Yuiman Osama. Yeah, I also seem to have exhausted all the info I can give related to the ship in Yuiman section, so I'll instead paraphrase something from Streamer's video on shipping. While shipping normally combines the names of the characters that are being shipped, for Japanese ships in particular, the placement of the name dictates the character status in the relationship, with the name that comes first being the one to lead the relationship. Without sugarcoating it, the first name is the dominant one. The most common ship name for Yuiman and Arya is Yui-Ari, meaning that Yuiman's name comes first, meaning that people see her as the dominant one in the relationship. And many people have come up with pretty crazy ideas with this information. Despite all that though, here's another relatively normal drawing of these two. Let's move on to the final character, the extra stage boss, Nina Watari. At 8th place with 1 work, we have Saki Kurokoma, Fukasa Kudamaki, and Hata no Kokoro. Saki is part of the compilation that I showed earlier in Ubame and Chimi's section. She does the classic put hand on wall to corner someone gesture on Nina, which initially wasn't enough for me to count her in, but another character that also appears in this compilation made me change my mind. You'll see who it is soon enough. I don't really know why Saki specifically was chosen, but gauging from the words she says in the drawing that you'll see in a bit, it seems she's talking about how she believes something along the lines of quote-unquote truth is strength. Saki respects strength, and as to not repeat myself, Nina has her thing about truths, just remember. As for Tsukasa, she's a scheming and sly fox. who isn't above spreading disinformation for her benefit, which means someone like Nina is exactly her target audience. As for Kokoro, well, here's something amusing. At first, I was going to straight up say, I don't know, I quite literally give up doing research in this one ship, but my brain seems to function very uniquely at 3 AM, as I was able to figure it out rather quickly. So the wiki lists Nina's species as a Shan, a creature that creates mirages. This is a Chinese word, and when put into other languages, it usually just means mirage. Like in Japanese, where the word is Shinkiro. Now, do you wanna know what the title of Kokoro's debut game, Hopeless Masquerade, is? It's Touhou Shinkiro, Hopeless Masquerade. So there we go. I found a link I didn't thought was possible. At first I was going to speculate that maybe it's because of some vague shared similarities, like how Nina was a fossil and Kokoro was a mask, before eventually being born and gaining sentience respectively. Nina doesn't know how to find correct information, Kokoro cannot express herself despite being a very emotional person, things like that. Thankfully I got a brain blast at the most crucial time. All of that being said, here's the drawing for Saki, Tsukasa, and Kokoro. On to the next one. At 7th place with 2 arc, we have Okina Matara and Regal Nightbug. Okina is the other character I talked about during Saki's section earlier, as she appears in the same compilation as her. As for the reasoning, alright, well unlike Kokoro, I actually don't know about this one. For all I know, the people that drew Okina and Nina together just thought, I don't know, their names sounded similar. It's kinda funny. Oh, whoops, Wriggle is also here. My bad. This one seemed like it should be simple, but the deeper I looked, the more conflicting information I got. The gist of it is that the ship is rooted in the respective animals that they are based on. Wriggle is a firefly, whereas Nina sits on a clam. But the name Nina is also used in the kanji that refers to a type of freshwater shellfish. Looking at the drawing I found, its title and caption reference the fact that fireflies eat snails, and I think snails are related to freshwater shellfish? Or are freshwater shellfish. I'm not a zoologist, as you can tell. Anyway, here's the drawing for Okina that's different from the compilation, and here's the drawing for Wriggle. Next, at 6th place with 4 works, we have Sanae Kochiya. Nina is yellow Sanae. That's it. Thank God I actually got a simple one this time around. Here's the drawing. Let's move on. At 5th place with 1 more for the road, 5 works, we have Reimu Hakure. If Sanae is green Reimu and Nina is yellow Sanae, does that make Reimu red Nina? Of course not, that makes 0 sense. Considering this is Reimu we're talking about, I'm comfortable just chalking it up to the protagonist getting shipped with anyone in Touhou ever. Though if I had to give a reasoning, upon defeating Nina, she begins to question what she should believe in, to which Reimu responds by saying that she should believe in the Hakure Shrine, for it is the quote-unquote truth of the world. I guess some people could interpret that to be flirting because Reimu asked Nina to come to her house or something. Who knows? Here's the drawing. Next, at 4th place with 6 works, we have Nareko Michigami. I was going to brush this off since I felt like I said everything I needed to in Nareko's section. But maybe I can add one more thing. As you know, Nina was born in the Asama Purifying Mountain, which Nareko is the guardian of. So perhaps with Nina's existence, Nareko finally gained someone to hang out with. Imagine becoming friends with someone that was just born though. Here's a different drawing. Onto the final top 3 for today. At 3rd place with 7 works, we have Arya Iwanaga. Well, I was planning on mentioning this in Ueman's section instead, but Arya came first, so I guess I'll talk about it now. Outside of a possible romantic relationship, Nina and Arya, along with Ueman, also tends to be depicted to have a more familial bond, with Ueman and Arya acting as Nina's guardians. This is further emphasized by the fact that I mentioned earlier about how Nina is only recently born in the Asama Purifying Mountain. In fact, here's a drawing for that right now. Despite the existence of that love heart, I can assure you that there's nothing romantic going on here. And hey, speaking of Yueman, at second place with 9 works, we have Yueman Asama. Well, shit, I just ran out of things to say because I used it up in Arya's section. Well, considering the video's almost over, I'm sure you don't mind if I just skip past this, right? Here's a different drawing, and now for our final winner. At first place with 32 works, we have Sumireko Usami. These two met in the recent chapter of Curiosities of Lotus Asia, the series of side stories told from the perspective of Rinosuke. This is where Rinosuke and Sumireko's relationship is established, with pretty much everyone in agreement that Rinosuke is Sumireko's dad, maybe arguably even more than him being a dad to Marisa, which is kind of fair considering Marisa already has a dad even if they're estranged. Rinosuke is more like her uncle in that sense. Anyway, when Sumireko and Nina met, I'll just take the words straight from the wiki here, they get along really well, with Sumireko explaining the differences between conspiracy and mysticism to Nina, and Nina becoming better due to meeting someone that shares the same brain cells as her. There have actually been a few drawings made prior to this chapter, so I wonder how those artists feel, having made a ship that would turn out to be Nina's most popular. Anyway, here's a drawing. And I don't actually know what to say here, because in the last video I just skipped over the first place, so outro time. And that marks the end of the Touhou 20 ship ranking, and possibly the end of the Touhou ship ranking series as a whole. There's a very simple solution. Just suggest a character for next time. I can't guarantee you that I'll make a video on your character anytime soon though, as my next college semester is on the horizon, so I'll need to focus on that and won't have time to make any videos, especially ones like these. I don't want to keep you for too long, especially since I don't have any teasers for future projects, so under the assumption that this will be the end of the series, I guess I'll say some parting words. To the few of you that check these videos out, I truly appreciate you. I'm not doing YouTube for the sake of money, not that I can because I'm pretty sure a minimum of 1000 subscribers is a requirement for monetization. But even without financial incentive, it's still a bummer to put your time and energy into something only for it to not meet your expectations. After all, a big part of YouTube's success is getting lucky. No way around it. So even if I didn't end up being lucky throughout this series of videos, I'm still content with the fact that I was able to make this series come to life in the first place. It's been fun. It may not have been the big splash that I had hoped, but you don't get anywhere without taking any risk. Do I regret investing a lot of time into this series? No, but I do regret not managing my time better, because then maybe the series would have been good from the start. Nevertheless, I'm proud with what I've been able to accomplish, and I'm grateful to the people that left a comment in these videos, as it's interesting to hear your opinions on certain ships, especially ones that aren't super popular. Beyond that, I'm also grateful to everyone that helped me in the making of these videos, whether it be for clarifying an information that I was uncertain about, or directly giving me facts about some ships that I would have never found out by myself. You guys know who you are. I went into this expecting this to be the shortest video in the series, but as I look at the word count in my script, I'd wager this is actually the longest one. Tell me if I ended up being correct. I think that's all I have to say. So what's next for this channel? Well, as I've teased in the Flandre video, I plan to have a heavily edited project sometime in the future. But at the moment, the scope is kind of too intimidating for me, so that won't be here anytime soon. So I guess, back to the Touhou Live arrangements. Hope I didn't keep you waiting for too long. I'll see you whenever that comes out. Bye bye.